It is wonderful to be with you today for another In Conversation With. I'm here today with Bishop Michael Beasley, who is Bishop of Hertford in the Diocese of St Albans. And I've been doing a little bit of research about you recently that we're going to come into in a moment. But we just want to first of all welcome you to this conversation and thank you for coming. How have you been recently?
It's great to be with you, Caroline. Thank you for having me. I've been really well. As you can imagine, the first part of the year has been a very busy time for all of us, and lockdown presented all kinds of challenges, getting used to different technology, reaching out to people, lots of pastoral care with different people around the diocese. So it was a busy year, but I've just had some break in August and now back to work refreshed and ready to go for the autumn.
Brilliant. So I like to do one thing when I interview or talk to people, which is to Google them. So I type your name into the internet and I have found that you have a Wikipedia page dedicated to you and your history.
Yes, and I don't know where that came from or who did it. It's a great mystery. It just appeared.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, not everyone has a Wikipedia page.
No, and I've never touched mine. I don't know who does it or why or how or where it came from, but there it is.
Ah, interesting. So we're going to have to work out whether the facts are factual. So the first thing that it says is, in my findings, it describes you like this. You are a British Church of England bishop and an epidemiologist?
I am a British bishop and it's called an epidemiologist.
Epidemiologist.
Yeah.
You're going to have to explain to us what that means.
So that was my original form of work, and an epidemiologist is somebody who looks at how disease affects populations of people. So most of the work that I did was work to improve the health of very poor children in low-income countries in Africa. So you might imagine a country like Malawi, for example. Children there have lots and lots of health issues or have had historically. A country with comparatively few hospitals or doctors or medical staff, but lots and lots of schools and lots of teachers. And the work that I was doing was to look at how teachers could deliver very simple health interventions to the children in their care, because that made the scale go massive really quickly to treat common infections.
Okay, so obviously common infections is quite a hot topic at the moment.
It's quite a hot topic at the moment. Yeah.
With that hat on, what have you made of this last couple of weeks? Well, months now.
I think it's been an extraordinary time, because what we've learned is we live in a world where we think we know so much and we have everything taped and our lives are solid and certain and predictable. And COVID-19 has arrived in the midst of us, and we've learnt how much we don't know. There's been so much we've had to learn, and so much we keep on learning, and that there's a provisionality around life that perhaps we didn't realise was there.
Oh, brilliant. That's really helpful. And so you have this role of bishop, so you're a faithful man, and your background is science, so a scientist and a bishop. And lots of people ask the question, how, some people will say, well, I'm a scientist, so I can't be a Christian. And yet you've managed to make them compatible, the two of them. How have you done that?
Yeah, I don't really buy this whole science-religion conflict model. I think it's a bit naff, really, if that's not a very bishopy word to use. It seems to me that I love science. Okay. Science is fantastic. It's the most amazing method for understanding the natural world around us. You want to know why that light switch is on, or why that curtain's green like that, or why that grass is growing out there, or why an antibiotic, when you take it, makes you feel better. The way to learn all about that is through the scientific method. It's just brilliant for understanding the natural world around us. But it can't tell you about love or honour or purpose or value, the value of a human being. I believe we have to look elsewhere for that, and for me, those things we find in God and in faith.
Absolutely. So how did you come to faith?
I'm very cradle Anglican.
Okay.
I was brought up in a small country parish church in Staffordshire, where I grew up. It's pretty much as it was put up in 1685, so it's still got the same form of service as they were using in 1685. Still the same layout inside the church. Very, very trad church, but it was a brilliant church at being a great family, and convincing everybody that was there that their presence, whether they were young or old, was absolutely essential to the church's operation.
Okay.
And so it gives a real ownership and a real sense of, yeah, that's my church, and grew up there. And then when I was about 18 or so, really felt, yeah, the Christian faith is for me, and I want to give my life to it.
No, that's brilliant. And also from the research into your journey, which some of it I slightly already knew. So you were science, and you read that in your time of studying. You also studied theology,
Yeah.
director of mission in the Diocese of Oxford, and then came and was consecrated bishop in the Diocese of St Albans.
Yeah.
So you've done lots of different things. So at different times in your life, you must have felt called to them. What would you say to someone right now who's trying to work out their job or their role or their calling, either outside of the church or inside of the church, or wanting to be a mechanic? How would they discern what God wants them to do?
I think it's to attend really well to that inner voice which prompts us to go in a particular direction. But then it's more than that. It's not just going in the direction, it's how we go in the direction. Because I was called to this work in infectious disease, but I hope that the way I was called to do it was out of to do my utmost to do it through a Christian value and mindset. And my hope would be, if you were a mechanic or a teacher or a brain surgeon or a dinner lady or any of these jobs that we can do, it's that's where God's put us in the world. That's where we want to be to follow his call, but to do it in the way where we recognise that there's where I'm called to serve. That's where I live out what it is to be a disciple of Jesus, to live out what it is to be baptised into the faith and live out that calling.
Really? Did you feel that sense when you were discerning being a bishop?
Yeah, that was quite a long, torturous process, because it's kind of what me, and it was incredibly valuable to have the perspective of other people that I knew and respected, helping me find my way through that whole process of, is this the right thing to do? How can I do this? Try and do this well. What does it mean to take on this role? Yeah.
I think that's profound, isn't it? Because a lot of people would say about journeys or discernment or people helping them and praying with others. So I think that's a really helpful way of looking at it for many people. And I want to shift the focus now a little bit to this season, because so many people at the moment are desperately seeking God's voice in a time of uncertainty, in a time of massive change. So flicking back to March until now, what do you think overall as a people or as a world are the primary lessons that we can learn from this coronavirus pandemic or season?
I think what we have seen sustain us is relationship, and we've been sustained by relationships that are formed over time and that are deep and strong, like they have deep anchors in the ground. Because I think what we see is stuff which is not well rooted, relationships which were were not terribly strong, or convictions that were kind of like, oh, I could take it or leave it, I'm not too bothered. I think those things have really struggled during this time, and what I've seen sustain people during this time is deeply held faith, deeply held friendships with other people, deeply held relationship with God or with other people. And those have been our anchor points to hold us and to draw on, if that's not mixing a metaphor too much, during this time. And so perhaps the question I would ask all of us is, and I ask myself, is how do I keep on maintaining those anchor points and making them deeper and stronger and better? How do I go deeper into God during this time? Because it's God that I need to see through times which are uncertain and perplexing and disturbing and quite a lot of the time just really boring, and yet to keep going within that.
So how do you recommend that people do that in this time?
Perhaps I can only speak for myself with integrity, but it's been something about finding times for silence, to take time to try to push to the side all that conflicting no that's constantly going around in my head, and take time to say, speak Lord, your servant's listening, I'm here, I want to listen to you, I want you to tell me what to do, and I'll do my real best to try and live it out. But that's really hard as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
As our families would tell us.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. And I think it's really interesting because so many people would say that their sustenance of their personal faith is going back to church on the Sunday and being with people. And a lot of churches at the moment are preparing for their entry again. It looks weird, it's different. Do you have any encouragements that you'd give to people that are almost coming back into the gathered church?
I think that's been one of the amazing things about the lockdown and the COVID is because I go to a lot of different churches. I've been going to a lot of different churches on Zoom, and I get to a lot of different churches in person. And what I've seen this year is, amongst congregations, is, wow, we really love each other.
Yeah.
We really do. There's a depth of genuine love in many of our churches, which I think is just amazing to see. Some of the most striking memories I have. I was in touch with one benefice which doesn't have a vicar at the moment, and they've not managed to have any services during lockdown. And I said, well, I'm free on this Sunday. I've got a Zoom account. You could all meet me on Zoom and we'll have a service together. I'll do it from my house and you can all be in your house, and it'll be great. And they kind of said, oh, okay, we'll do it because you're the bishop and we have no choice, kind of almost look. But the sight on their faces when they saw each other, and they'd not seen each other for weeks, was amazing. Yeah. And it was like, wow, there's real love here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're highlighting already the amazing things that have come out in this season for church and all the different opportunities that have arisen. And what have you seen in the last couple of months that has excited you about what God is doing through churches and Christians in this season?
I think we've had this amazing opportunity of moving worship online, to see the number of people who've engaged through online worship who might never have set foot over a church door, either because they've never been, or they've been once and they've been hurt and they didn't want to come back again. But having it online has given people that permission, or perhaps not permission, the ease to come back. And that's been a wonderful opportunity for our churches to say, this is who we are, this is what we're about. Come and encounter us, not what people say about us.
Yeah.
And I guess the challenge now, as we go as the world goes back to normal and as we go back to normal, is how to say, okay, you encountered us online during that season. Come and see us. Come and see what this is like in 3D.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that God was telling us anything in this season for the church that he wanted us to change, or a primary message he thinks that he was wanting us to have?
I think it's been an extraordinary opportunity because churches are human institutions as well as of God. And the way that churches often are is, we get into a point of saying, it's always been done this way, it has to be like this, or we get very set in our ways because that's what human beings do. And what coronavirus did was just threw all that up in the air. We couldn't do anything the way we had always done it. And so perhaps, if anything, that's given us permission to look at ourselves and not to hold so hard to the way it's always been done, and to have that permission to think afresh.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to shift gear a tiny bit because there are numerous people who have suffered a lot of loss. People have lost graduations, people haven't been able to say goodbye to people in the way they want, funerals, etc., etc. And I just want to ask you, what if you were thinking about those people that are feeling that feeling of loss, and almost going into autumn it's worse because it's making them feel horrible, what would you say to them? What would you want to say to them?
It's okay to lament.
Yeah.
It's okay to cry out and shout and say, this was rubbish. This isn't what we wanted. I feel cheated. Why did this happen to me? What are you doing, God? That stuff's all in the Bible. Pick up the Psalms. Lots of them are saying those deep things to God. But again, it goes back to that stuff about relationship. You can only scream at God if you're it's part of the relationship, isn't it? And I think lament, we need to recapture that during this time because it has been a grim time for many people and not what anybody would ever wish, and yet we need to come through it. Absolutely.
That's really encouraging. And it's almost every couple of weeks there's a different kind of flavour that comes out for different people. And one of the things that seems to even coming out this morning is people are now a bit tired and they're a bit frustrated and they're starting the new schools and all sorts of different things. What would be your encouragement to people we're going into autumn, we've got all sorts of different challenges coming again, we're already tired. What would you say to the people that are feeling tired and frustrated with this the challenge of the few weeks coming?
It's a real test of our characters, isn't it? It's a real test of can we dig deep to see our way through this time? I don't know if you picked up on the news this week. It's been stories of a number of news presenters talking about what their grandfathers did during the war, the last World War, and this kind of astonishment of the resource and the character and the courage that their generation showed in that trial. And I think our challenge in our day is to say, how do we dig deep to come through this so that we keep hold of what's valuable and important and beautiful and strong and don't just see that lost during this time. It's a test of our faithfulness, our prayer. It's a tough time.
Absolutely. So it seems like a sense of not losing hope, not losing character, anchoring in God.
And there is there is hope. I mean, that's part of being the epidemiologist thing, is this is an epidemic that we will come through.
Yeah.
We hope and pray that they're one of the of all these hundreds of vaccines, well, not hundreds, I think it's 127 last time I looked, vaccines in trial, in preparation, and I think 30 in trials around the world. You know, I think it's to be hopeful that one of those will work, and to be hopeful that this will not be how we're going to be living long term, that we will go back to living in community, with each other, in relationship, in love.
Then people also want to ask the question about those that are feeling really anxious. So we knew that as a kind of society that we've been called an age of uncertainty and an age of anxiety, and now for a lot of people that's just been multiplied off the roof, you know, that even if a vaccine comes or the coronavirus is sorted, that all of a sudden they're going to still feel afraid and a bit more cautious with people. What would you say to people that are just simply scared?
I guess there's two answers to that. There's the bishop answer and there's a scientist answer.
Want both.
I think the bishop answer is that if God is for us, who can be against us? That if we're with God, then ultimately we have nothing to fear. And that's why do not be afraid is the most common commandment in the Bible. That's what God commands us to do more than anything else, is do not be afraid. And I think our challenge is to listen to that voice and not to give in to anxiety or despair, but to trust in God. And the scientist answer is that the reality is that for most of us, God willing at the moment, the risk of serious illness and disease is getting less, not more, and the vaccine has the ability to bring that risk down even more. We can't promise it, but our understanding at the moment is that the worst that we've seen has been, and we pray that we'll avoid any more like that.
Brilliant. Coming to the last closing of the questions now at the moment, and what excites you about church and its future?
I think what excites me is to see the freedom and joy that I see in lives where people have fully embraced life with God. That they're not afraid, that they're not held back, that they are fully able to live into being the people that God's made them to be. That they're stepping into God's kingdom and enjoying it now. I think that's what's hugely exciting, and it's exciting for me as a bishop to go around the diocese and see extraordinary amounts of great stuff happening, and really good people doing good things and living that life. And I think my hope for the church is that we can do more and more of that, and less and less and less of just having to hold up the institution, really. To be what it's about.
Absolutely. So a lot of people would say that they find it very easy to make someone a cup of tea or do a community event, and that's easy, and they pray and they're excited to be around people. But sometimes the sharing of the faith bit is the harder bit. What would be your encouragement to someone that wants to share their faith with another person?
I think the encouragement is is to encourage people to say, tell people what it's like for you. I talked about being a scientist. For a number of years I worked in the Department of Zoology in Oxford, which is where Richard Dawkins operates out of. And we had a wonderful guy who was an absolute expert in birds. He was reader in ornithology or something like that. A wonderful, wonderful man who came to faith and was quizzed about this by some of his more atheist colleagues, and his response was to tell them, look, this is what it does in my life. This is what it's like for me. And it got very interesting because they started to dissuade him that this could possibly be true. And he floored them all by turning around and saying, my experience, it's not up for your peer review.
No.
So my encouragement is to say, this is what it's like.
Yeah.
This is how I find it. This is why it gives me peace and joy and helps me live a better life.
But it's really helpful, isn't it? Because everyone has a story. So everyone has something they can share.
And we all have a valid story to share.
Absolutely. This is the final question for you.
Okay.
I think it might be my favourite one. If you could, in one short sentence, say what you think the most important thing to remember about the Christian faith, what would it be?
Oh, wow. One sentence about the Christian faith.
You can have
It's
two.
that God came to be with us. That Jesus comes to be with us. God loves us so much that he comes to be with us and for us and to give us life and reconciliation and peace. And that's what we see in Jesus.
Okay. Emmanuel. I think we'll close the conversation now. Thank you so much for inspiring us and encouraging us. It has been a joy to have this conversation with you. I know that many will be very excited to watch it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.